Hello, Social 20, and welcome back. So, last lesson we looked at what are some of the nationalist loyalties, especially we looked at two case studies from Canada. We looked at the Oka crisis, and then we also looked at the Quebec separatist referendum. So, what we're going to talk about today are what are some of the loyalties that people can have that aren't related to nationalism. And then finally, we're going to explore 3 ways that people can reconcile some of their loyalties. So, we are all going to get into situations where we have to choose between 2 loyalties, and today we're going to look at what are the 3 ways that people often choose. These are the objectives today for our lesson. And what we're going to start with is just a list of all of the non-nationalist loyalties. So these are loyalties that people have. Maybe they don't have any loyalty to any of them. Maybe they have strong loyalties. And we're going to go through some of the non-nationalist loyalties, starting with class loyalty. So having a class loyalty is a loyalty to not your social class or your science class, but actually a societal class. So it's a sense of loyalty towards, certain, it's almost a socioeconomic status, or where do you kind of see yourselves. You might not think people have any loyalty, and some don't. Some countries this is stronger, some countries it's not. An example would be perhaps a family that has always worked in what we call blue-collar occupation. So typically those are more trade-related occupations, and they're not in an office. And a lot of them are tradespeople. They are building, they're hair cutting. And so when people have a loyalty, they say, no, I'm not going to university because I would be the first person in my family to do that. And there's almost this sense of loyalty towards we are always kind of this way and I don't want to change it. So it could be, working class or some people who are, let's say, the top 1%, what we call the upper class, have a loyalty to that. And I need to find a partner within my upper class system. And so that is a sense of loyalty. Some people have this, some people don't. So it's really what people choose in it and how loyal they are to that. The next one is religious loyalty. So any loyalty to an organization and usually the associated beliefs in it. So the common ones are, we'll look at Catholic Church, Buddhism, any, Jewish. So when we look at religious loyalties, some people have, let's say, been baptized into a religion, and then it's up to them to choose how loyal they are to that. Do they stay within that religion? For example, do they then choose to baptize their own children, or will they maybe not instill that loyalty to the next generation? Religious loyalties can be something that's perhaps not even questioned in different societies or families. It's just there, it's expected of you, and some are very much based on personal choice. It really is very specific to people, how they feel about religious loyalties, and that will be, of course, based on a lot of their own perspectives and their own experiences with that. Another non-nationalist loyalty is actually your regional loyalty. So we have, I think, especially in Canada, being such a large country, we do have lots of different regions with specific loyalties. So people who live in Toronto have a very strong sense of their regional loyalty to their city. Not everybody, but they have a different sense of, loyalty to the city compared to somebody who's living in Saskatchewan or Alberta. So it can be about loyalty to a region. We have in Alberta a distinct identity, of course, separate from the rest of the country, and how loyal is someone to that region. We talk about specifically the East Coast when we're talking about the Maritimes, and we've got the West Coast, Vancouver, and the Arctic, which has a very distinct culture. So regional loyalty is really more about, it's not a sense of nationalism, it's more a sense of belonging to that particular place that you're in. And that can be very individual as well. Some people don't feel that sense of loyalty, and so that usually will cause them to move somewhere. Or somebody moves somewhere, but they never quite feel like it's home, and then they can't wait to move back. They would probably be a person that would identify with a higher sense of loyalty to that region. The next loyalty is called an ideological loyalty. So when you are going to go into Social 30, your entire unit will be on ideologies. So an ideology is really a fancy word for just a set of beliefs, a shared idea about what you think society should look like. So when we're talking about an ideology, common ones that you might have heard of are liberal, conservative, a Marxist, communist. So an ideology is a set of beliefs. So some people are very loyal. This is really pronounced. It's not necessarily political, but it is tightly kind of displayed through politics. So does somebody believe, that the class system should be abolished and we're all the same and we all have equality, we all have the same wage and we all live in the same type of house? That would be a very tight kind of belief to communism. Or does somebody believe that actually disparity is okay and personal wealth and the pursuit of goals and personal freedom should be advanced? That's more associated with capitalism and conservatism. So we have these kind of loyalties to certain thoughts, and this becomes more pronounced as you get older and you start to try to kind of define how you believe a society should work. So in the United States, we see two very divided ideologies between Democrats and Republicans, and people tend to have a very strong loyalty and sometimes will vote their entire lives, no matter who the person is, based on that ideology. So you hear some people say they vote for, the ideology or the political party as opposed to the person. They're voting on that loyalty. The next one is a cultural loyalty. So a sense of it can be a culture that's defined or kind of more a sense of a subtle culture. So when we talk about, ranchers and farmers, there's a very strong culture there. And that sense of loyalty to keeping that going, and some of the practices, whether they're, something that's defined or just kind of carried on, is a sense of cultural loyalty. So we look at also our First Nations. They have a strong sense of culture. How it doesn't necessarily mean, so you can be born, let's say, on a reserve to a First Nations, but some of them maybe don't choose to practice or have that strong sense of loyalty towards, the tribe. So it's really more a choice about the cultural loyalty. The culture will exist. The loyalty is how strongly you identify with it or how you feel about it, and whether you want to continue to support it or change it or step away from it. So it's really loyalty to a specific display of a way of life. The last one that we're going to look at is racial or ethnic loyalty. So it can be loyalty to a specific ethnicity that you were born into, or a race. Of course, you don't choose that. None of us chose our ethnicity. But what is your choice is how loyal you are to that. So when we look at, for instance, the Tutsis, they were a tribe that was in Rwanda. Hutus and Tutsis were in a large conflict, all throughout the 90s. And that sense of loyalty was almost destructive to the point where it caused genocide. And so when we're choosing an ethnic loyalty, do we choose it? And we talk about, let's say, North Koreans, do we choose our ethnic loyalty to the point where we don't accept anybody else? We don't support immigration. We don't support anybody kind of coming in and, practicing a different, culture, which changes our whole country. So we're going to stay just ethnically the same. And that has really been an interesting choice by some countries throughout time. And so we see some of it forced, some of it choice. It really has depended on where the person is. Okay, so we've looked at all of the different, these are some loyalties. There's other loyalties, of course. We're not looking at things like sports teams and favorite athletes and things like that, although people have very strong loyalties in that. But what we're going to look at now, the main sense of loyalties, what are some of the ways people can choose? So let's say, I have a loyalty to, let's say, a class system, but I also have, a loyalty to something else that clashes with that. How do I choose if I don't feel like I don't feel that sense of loyalty to my region? What are some of the ways I can reconcile that? So we're going to look at these three. When we have a loyalties, let's say, you have a regional loyalty, but it might clash with something that does not mix. So when we have, let's say you want to move to a place because you don't have a sense of regional loyalty, but the place doesn't really accept the religion that you practice, or they don't accept, your culture. So what are your three options? The first one is just to ignore them. This is maybe at times beneficial, maybe it's not. But if you have a loyalty or two that are competing, sometimes people don't know how to respond. I can't choose. The Flames are playing the Oilers tonight. I have a regional loyalty to Edmonton, but now I live in Calgary and I can't choose. So sometimes people take no choice. I'm not going to cheer for any, or I'm not going to go to the game. So this is often from, sometimes a sense of powerlessness. People feel like they can't make a difference. It doesn't matter, and this can happen with voting. There is, let's say, 2 or 3 candidates, both of them are strong, somebody can't decide between the two, they don't even go to cast their vote because they think it's just one vote, and then nothing happens. It's really about, I can't make a difference. And that's not what we want active, engaged citizens to do. So ignoring your loyalties sometimes can be beneficial if it's a very personal loyalty. But when it comes to making a difference in society, we always encourage people to practice every single manner that has an influence that they can. Another one is to choose one loyalty over the other. So sometimes, let's say you have a loyalty that clashes, with a country like communist China. There are some religions that are very persecuted there. So do you choose the loyalty to your religion at the expense of the threat of violence or being thrown into a labor camp? How strong is that loyalty? So for instance, if you practice certain religions in China, you can be tortured, you can be killed. If you don't obey the government, you have a huge consequence. So is that loyalty to your specific religion going to be more important to you? Or are you going to go along with what the government's wishes are and not? And this is a really difficult thing. We've seen some people over time really make big, impactful decisions by this, but this is not an easy thing to do. And oftentimes it can lead to violence, and it can even lead to death in certain extreme circumstances in some countries as well. The third one is, don't take any kind of thing for a solid choice and try to bring about change. So this is kind of seen through somebody like Martin Luther King, who fought so hard for, rights, and he was not willing to accept that there was going to be segregation and Black people didn't have access to education and equality, and they didn't want to sit, in certain areas in the bus and have to use certain bathrooms. So his real mission and belief and his conflicting loyalties were to bring about change. So he wanted to fight for reconciliation between two opposing sides. For example, when we look at the civil rights movement. So, he had a sense of loyalty, of course, to the country, and he had to kind of break the law and really stand strong. And he was very impactful in not accepting their situation in society at the time. And so he had conflicting loyalties, but he didn't accept them. He fought for change. And he would, of course, he was a very powerful, impactful speaker. I would encourage you to watch some of his videos and to kind of really feel how some people have fought really hard to bring about change to two opposing sides that were in conflict in their loyalties. So those are some of the typical non-nationalist loyalties. These are some of the ways that people can choose to deal with them, and we have seen throughout history. So we're going to be looking at some of these in more depth as we look at more examples throughout the next couple of units, but I hope it is clear to you what a contending loyalty is and what are the possible ways to deal with them. See you next time.
If you enjoyed this video, check out our website, online.plrd.ab.ca, and visit us on Facebook, Prairieland Online Academy. You can find out all that's going on with Prairieland Online Academy.